Chapter 9. Wait, what? Neville blurted upon crossing the fire. It really was Quirrell. Damn, now I owe the Weasley twins money. You were betting on who was out to kill me? Harry asked. Isn't that a bit morbid? Oh, like you're one to talk. You bring up your facial disfigurement as you call it every chance you get, Neville pointed out. Harry shrugged. Yeah, well everyone seems to love talking about it, so I figure I was doing them a favor. And at least the Weasley twins had faith in me. Before Neville could answer, Quirrell spoke. I wondered whether I'd be meeting you here, Potter. I must say, I didn't expect to see Longbottom, though. Harry looked confused. Why were you wondering whether you'd see me? I'm bloody 11, I really should have more sense than to go after a fuller-trained wizard who wants to kill me armed only with some of my first-year classmates. Although if he were really 11, it probably wouldn't have occurred to him to force an adult to listen after getting the brush off from McGonagall. God knows it hadn't last time. He really should have been more specific about why he thought the stone was in danger. Gee, I don't know, Quirrell said sarcastically. Could it be the fact that every time I face away from you, you insist that your scar is on fire? Harry opened his mouth to answer and then abruptly closed it again. Fair point, he conceded. I must say, I didn't honestly expect you to figure it out considering Severus seems so much the type. I mean, who in their right mind would suspect me, poor stuttering Professor Quirrell when that overgrown bat was swooping around? I would. Harry? I believe the question was who in their right mind, Neville reminded him. Oh, right. But maybe I wouldn't have figured it out if you didn't have bloody Tom Riddle on the back of your head. This was news to all present. Neville had no idea what Harry was talking about in the slightest, Quirrell had no idea who Tom Riddle was, and Tom Riddle had no idea how Harry knew that that was his real name and not Voldemort. Quirrell evidently decided not to ask and snapped his fingers, tying both Neville and Harry up. Harry cursed himself for forgetting about that and focused on trying to remove the ropes without his wand. He could do it if he had enough time, but he'd need to concentrate. In the meantime, Quirrell took the opportunity to mutter to himself about how to find the stone. Suddenly, Voldemort said, use the boy, use the boy. Neville started. Would that be Tom Riddle, he whispered. Harry merely nodded. Quirrell rounded on Harry. Yes, Potter, come here. He undid the rope surrounding Harry and bade him to look in the mirror. Unlike the last time when Harry had thought the stone would be safer in his pocket than in the enchanted mirror that Quirrell couldn't figure out and was frustrated and desperate enough to rely on a child to get it, Harry didn't actually want the stone. Well? Quirrell asked impatiently. What do you see? I see my family, Harry paused. Again. Seriously, people, this isn't going to change so stop asking. You don't see the stone? Quirrell asked, disappointed and a little skeptical. Why would I want the stone? Harry challenged. It seems safe enough where it is. As Harry began to discreetly inch away from Quirrell, Voldemort spoke again. The other boy has it. Harry froze. Damn it. He really should have mentioned that looking in the mirror was a bad idea. Quirrell started towards Neville, who, for his part, looked terrified. Let me speak to them, face to face. Voldemort decided. While Quirrell was making his cursory protest and doing what Voldemort wanted anyway, Harry wondlessly and silently managed to free Neville. Ah! Neville yelped, at seeing the face of Voldemort for the first time. Harry was calmer. He knew that he could handle Voldemort as he was now, he just wasn't sure about Neville. Harry Potter and Neville Longbottom. How ironic that it should be the two of you standing here together to face me. Ironic, yet fitting. Tom Riddle. I'm fairly certain you're a paedophile. Neville nearly choked. He didn't quite know who this was, but he had a nagging feeling that he should. You dare. Voldemort began angrily, although whether he was more upset by the use of his real name or by Harry's accusation, it was hard to say. Yeah, I do, let's just skip the part where you're offended I know your name, get on with it, shall we? Harry suggested. Voldemort was silent for a moment. Then he said, there was a prophecy, you know. Harry tensed. What was Voldemort trying to do here? He hadn't said anything of the sort when Harry had first met him before. Was it because of Neville's presence? The prophecy told me that there would be a boy born at the end of July whose parents had defied me 3 times who would stop me. That could have applied to either of you. I chose to attack Harry here and he did indeed stop me. Temporarily. Prophecy fulfilled. So you see, there really is no reason for me to kill you, or your friend for that matter, Neville. Just give me the stone in your pocket and you have my word that I shall not harm either of you. The word of a liar and a murderer, Harry snapped. Why you? Neville swallowed hard. You destroyed my parents' minds. That wasn't me, Neville, that happened after I was gone. Bellatrix Lestrange, always one of my most faithful if misguided followers, thought that your parents, as prominent aurors and widely known to be close to that puppet master Dumbledore, would know what had happened. I do not condone their actions and I will make them suffer for taking your parents from you, Neville. Just say the word, give me the stone and your parents will be avenged. Neville was shaking uncontrollably now. Why you could have just as easily attacked me and killed my parents. But I didn't, Voldemort's voice was soft, persuasive. I went after Harry because I didn't want to spill any pureblood blood unnecessarily in case I chose wrong. Noble pureblood children such as yourself are the future, dear Neville. Driving your parents into insanity was such a waste. They were a fine witch and wizard. Once I'm restored, I will rectify every case of worthy pureblood such as your parents losing everything but their life. I can give you back your parents. Just give me the stone. Neville was quiet for a long moment. No. Before Voldemort could process Neville's refusal, Harry seized the opportunity and leapt at Quirrell, pressing his hands to the man's face. The pain in Harry's scar was so intense that Harry couldn't see. He knew he should probably have interceded before now, but, somewhat like Dumbledore, he wanted to give Neville an opportunity to face Voldemort and figured that refusing to give in to Voldemort even when he was promising everything would do wonders for Neville's still struggling self-esteem. Just as Harry was about to pass out, he heard Reducto, and Quirrell went still. He looked up and saw Neville, eyes wide, lower his wand. Oh Harry. Neville. Hermione cried the minute they exited the corridor. For lack of any better ideas, they had simply rode Harry's broom up through the trapdoor. She immediately hugged them both. Hey, Hermione, Harry said weakly. Did you find Professor Dumbledore? Indeed she did, Dumbledore spoke up from behind Harry. How did he dash? It was best not to ask. Now, I'm sure you have many questions for me and I know I have a few for you, but first why don't we get you all to the hospital wing? When Madame Pomfrey was done tending to them and Ron and Hermione sent on their way, Dumbledore returned. You should probably give Professor Dumbledore the Philosopher's Stone, Harry started things off by suggesting. Neville's eyes widened. Oh right. I had completely forgotten about that. Indeed, Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. You must have had a lot of excitement down there. Harry snorted. Well, that's one word for it. I killed Professor Quirrell. Silence followed that declaration and Neville just stared down at his hospital bed, clutching at the sheets. He hadn't been discharged because he hadn't stopped shaking once they reached the hospital wing. What happened? Dumbledore's tone was grave. Sensing Neville probably didn't want to talk about it, Harry took a deep breath and began. Quirrell was after the stone. Ron was taken by the Queen in the chess match we were playing and there was only enough of the potion to get us through the flames to see Quirrell for 2 people, so Hermione went back to Ron. The Mirror of Erised was there and Quirrell tried to use me to get the stone, but I didn't really want it and so Neville, who apparently wanted to get but not use the stone, managed to get it instead. This caused Quirrell to unwrap his turban and reveal that he had Voldemort on the back of his head. Voldemort, he promised Neville his parents back if he just handed over the stone. Neville said no. Voldemort was going to attack Neville so I used my mother's sacrifice magical love protection to burn Quirrell's face and right when I was about to collapse from magical exhaustion, Neville fired a reducto at him. I killed him, Neville said again. Quirrell was already dead, Dumbledore told him gently. He was dead the minute he allowed Voldemort to take up residence in his body. He would have died anyway the minute Voldemort left him, which he would have done tonight, regardless of if he took the stone from you and crafted himself a new body or if he failed and decided that poor Quirinus had outlived his usefulness. So it's not my fault. Neville sounded dubious. No, it's not, Harry agreed. He knew that it would take a while for it to truly sink in and he wished that it hadn't had to happen this way, but there was nothing he could do about that now. He honestly hadn't expected Neville to attack Quirrell while he was burning him with his touch. So, what's going to happen to the stone now? Harry asked, to change the subject onto less depressing matters. Dumbledore then proceeded to explain how the Flammels were all set to die now, but it was okay because they were really old anyway. So, maybe it was only slightly less depressing. Do you have any more questions? Dumbledore asked genially. Well, Voldemort did say one interesting thing I was hoping you could explain, Harry said innocently. Dumbledore nodded, indicating that he should continue. Apparently there was some sort of a prophecy about Neville and I that caused him to come after me, Harry said slowly, enjoying the sight of all the colour draining out of Dumbledore's face. Something about me being the only one to stop him. I did not intend for you to find out like this, Dumbledore said at last, sighing. And especially not at such a young age. I had hoped, but alas, what's done is done, I suppose, and there is no use lamenting the fact. I wish I had a pensive with me, but I do not so I will to simply tell you the prophecy, the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and neither must die at the head of the other for neither can live while the other survives. And that could mean either me or Harry? Neville asked, looking faint. Alas, no, the prophecy is about Harry. When Voldemort chose to go after Harry and gave him his scar, he marked him and made the prophecy about him, Dumbledore replied. Neville tried not to look too relieved as he realized it would not probably be up to Harry to stop Voldemort. Sir? You realize that I'm 11, right? And not really the most responsible person around. And you really shouldn't expect me to be the only one who can kill him. I wouldn't dream of expecting anything from you for a few years yet. And, in fact, I cannot make you do anything. On the other hand, by the time that you come face to face with Voldemort for the last time, knowing he wants to kill you, knowing he has killed or tried to kill countless others, you may very well decide that killing him would be for the best. Certainly if he regains a body and does not stop hunting you, chances are very good that either of you will die at the hand of the other. Harry walked to the leaving feast with a heavy heart. Sure, Hagrid had gotten him a scrapbook filled with pictures of his parents. He'd spent all night at the impromptu we're graduating party the 7th years through, at Tonk's insistence, as he didn't really know the other 7th years very well, and he'd get to see Ginny again soon. On the other hand, Gryffindor had indeed won the House Cup this year, despite his best efforts to the contrary. Harry tried his best to appear depressed when Dumbledore announced that Gryffindor was in the lead. On the bright side, this meant no need for last-second points. Recent events must be taken into account, Dumbledore continued. Harry groaned. Of course they must. Dumbledore awarded Ron 50 points for the best-played game of chess Hogwarts had ever seen, despite the fact that there was really no objective way to measure something like that. Hermione 50 points for not poisoning herself or her classmates, Neville 50 points for lighting a rare and valuable plant on fire, and Harry got 60 points for not telling a responsible adult about Quirrell's attempt to steal the stone and for endangering several of his classmates. Of course, Dumbledore might have phrased it slightly differently, but it was still blatant favoritism. Harry started banging his head on the table and didn't stop until Percy got so annoyed he threatened to hex him. It really wouldn't do to get Percy in the habit of doing that, as his refusal to do so was really the only reason why Harry was able to do some of his more public after-hours activities. The celebration at the Gryffindor table over finally being the best sycophantic house got so annoying that halfway through the feast Harry got up and went to go sit by the Slytherins. He spent the rest of the feast commiserating with them and complaining about the blatant favoritism. Dumbledore, who couldn't hear what he was saying, smiled broadly at Harry's mature attitude of reaching out across house lines. As the Hogwarts Express was pulling into the station, Harry was honestly glad that the train ride was over, for the first time in his life. He, Ron, Hermione, and Neville had just sat back and let all of Harry's various acquaintances and Neville's herbology friends come visit them throughout the train ride. Unfortunately, this had not stopped Hermione from pestering Harry about his exam results. So he made the highest first-year grade since Dumbledore and was now being hailed as a prodigy. To both of their annoyances, it was really just the 12-year age advantage. After all, being an adult who had to sit through boring meetings and hold press conferences and regularly petition the Wizengamot meant that he officially had an attention span sufficient enough to pay attention in Bin's class, so he even did well in history of magic despite his blatant refusal to study. And that was why Hermione was convinced he either cheated or was holding back his brilliance all this time. You must come and stay this summer, said Ron. All of you, I'll send you an owl. Oh, and by all I meant everyone but Malfoy and his goons. Which just left Harry, Hermione, and Neville. Like I would even want to, Draco shot back. My bedroom's bigger than your whole house. Harry rolled his eyes. Draco, remember what we're talking about, how it's not nice to stalk your father's political rivals. And that reminds me, this might be a weird question, but do you have a house elf named Dobby? Draco nodded. Now who's stalking who? You are. You're stalking Ron. We just talked about this. But anyway, the reason I asked is because you remember how my scar told me that Quirrell was out to kill me. Draco nodded uncertainly. Well, it also told me that you have a house elf named Dobby who will steal all of my mail this summer, so if you could order him to leave my mail alone, that'd be great. Draco shrugged. Why not? Once they got off the train and lined up to go through the gates in small groups, Tonks came up to him, hair bubblegum pink. So I got accepted into the Aura Academy, she said. And this is my celebratory hairstyle. So you're going to keep it like that? Harry asked, amused. Yep. I'm going to keep it like this every time. I'm not disguising myself for as long as I'm over the moon about this. I would have told you earlier, of course, but I was too busy hiding from Percy. Hiding from Percy? Why? He's like the least threatening person ever, Harry pointed out. I know, but he wanted to hear me go over Newts for the third time and ask how I thought he did during OWLS by regaling me with the fascinating tale of every little answer he put or spell he cast, Tonks complained. Sounds like Hermione, Ron said bluntly. Hey. So isn't there anything I can do to get you to let me call you Nympho? I mean, your first name, Harry hastily amended as Tonks glared at him. Nope, sorry. Oh, come on. I'll give you my firstborn. Harry promised. Tonks laughed. Aren't you a little young to be thinking about that kind of thing? Harry shrugged. By all estimates, he should be a dad by now. If it was a boy, they'd name him James Sirius, and if it was a girl, they'd go with Lily Luna. Keep in touch, won't you? Harry asked her as she was about to head through the barrier. Oh, you couldn't get rid of me if you tried, she told him as she disappeared. When Harry and Ron went through, followed by Hermione and Neville, Harry heard quite a bit of gossip surrounding Draco Malfoy and the question Harry threw on his parentage at the beginning of the year. He snorted, he'd completely forgotten about that. There he is, Mum, there he is, look! Ginny exclaimed, jumping up and down, the minute she saw Harry. Hi, Ginny, right? Harry smiled at her. Why yes, she said, looking anywhere but at him. You're going to Hogwarts next year, right? She merely nodded. I'll see you there, then. Oh, and Mrs. Weasley, I wanted to thank you for your very thoughtful Christmas present. Oh, it was nothing, dear, she assured him. Well, I'd better go, Harry said. I think my uncle might still be mad at me. Since September? Mrs. Weasley asked, shocked. Well, he did send me death threats at Christmas, Harry told her. Oh my. When Harry arrived at home, he saw a large black dog lying on the Dursleys' front lawn as if waiting for him. Harry quickly stashed his stuff in his room. He might have threatened to turn Uncle Vernon blue if he tried to lock his school things away, but did promise not to use any magic, and ran out to meet him. "Hey boy," he greeted. "You look like you could use a walk. I'm going to the park. Come with me?" The dog just cocked its head like it didn't understand, but consented to follow Harry. Once he reached the park, which was thankfully deserted, he sat down on one of the swings and looked straight at the dog. Well, Sirius. It's been a while." Chapter 10. Sirius froze. "Come now, Padfoot, don't be like that. It'll be a pretty piss-poor reunion if one of us is pretending to be a stray dog the whole time," Harry told him, crossing his arms. Sirius quickly resumed his human form. He looked better than Harry remembered, probably because he had escaped earlier and had 3 years of freedom under his belt before he came back in time. "Reunion?" he asked carefully. "What do you mean reunion? Harry Potter can't possibly remember me. I haven't seen him since he was an infant. Who are you?" Harry smiled. "Harry Potter. But I think you've got your facts wrong. You haven't seen me since you tripped through the Veil of Death." "I didn't trip through it," Sirius protested indignantly. "Bellatrix hit me with a curse, and while I admit that I probably should have been paying more attention, it could have happened to anyone and, wait. How do you know Dash?" "How do you?" Harry countered. "I was there." "So was I," Harry told him. "You fell through the veil, too. What, were you chasing me or something? I'd have thought that Moony would have had the sense to restrain you. He was standing right there. That's highly irresponsible, especially for him." Sirius trailed off. Harry snorted. "I hardly think you're one to lecture anyone else about responsibility, but, for the record, he did. No, I came through the veil later." "How much later?" Sirius asked. Harry shrugged. 8 years or so. Sirius's eyes bulged out. 8 years? That makes you, what? 23? Harry nodded. "Mentally, yes, although physically, of course, I'm closer to 12. "What happened? Did you defeat Voldemort? What did you come back? Did everyone die? Tell me everything," Sirius demanded. "Well, Dumbledore got Snape to assist in his suicide at the end of 6th year but didn't bother telling anyone else about it, so we all thought he was evil until right after he died at the end of what would have been my 7th year had Voldemort not taken over the Ministry half a month or so before school started. I spent most of the year on the camping trip from hell. A myriad of people died, including Remus, Tonks, and Fred, and I killed Voldemort after he killed me. Oh, and Remus and Tonks got married." "What was that last part?" Sirius asked. "Remus and Tonks got married?" Harry repeated innocently. "No, the other last part. The one about Voldemort killing you," Sirius clarified. "Oh, well, he killed me and I had a nice chat with Dumbledore's soul, who informed me that just because I was imagining things it didn't make it not real, and then I got better." Sirius just stared at him. "It gets better," Harry grinned. "Apparently I only survived because of the power of love." Sirius groaned. "For the record, when you're telling this to other people, try to come up with an explanation that sounds more badass." "Who says I'm telling other people?" "But if you don't tell other people that you're from the future, how will they be prepared?" Sirius asked sensibly. "What do they need to be prepared for? Things ended pretty decently last time. I married Ginny Weasley, who was pregnant with my child at the time I left, and Ron and Hermione got married. So, really, aside from Fred dying, it was one big happy Weasley family. Molly was thrilled to bits, let me tell you." "I can imagine," Sirius remarked wryly. "Besides, if I can destroy the Horcruxes before Voldemort's rebirth, then I just have to wait until he uses my blood to revive himself, let him kill me to get rid of the final Horcrux, come back and kill him." "You make it sound so easy," Sirius muttered. "I've got 3 years, I'll make it work. Are you up to helping me torch the Horcruxes?" Harry asked. "Do you even have to ask?" Sirius asked. "Although I'm not quite sure how one goes about destroying Horcruxes except exposure to Dementors, Basilisk Venom, and Fiend Fire." "Exposure to Dementors? And how do you even know about Horcruxes anyway?" "They're supposed to be really obscure," Harry repeated, confused. Sirius nodded. "Oh yes, Horcruxes are part of a wizard's soul, and so a Dementor's kiss can destroy it. And please, Harry, I'm a black. Knowing about Horcruxes is just one of the many benefits of growing up in one of the darkest families in Britain." "Guess so." "Hey, do you know Fiend Fire?" Harry asked. "I've never actually tried, but I've heard that with a little practice, any moderately powerful wizard can have some measure of control over it," Sirius told him. "So can you start learning it?" "I would, except my wand is currently being monitored as I'm technically a minor and I want this out of the way as soon as possible. See if you can get it down by the end of the summer. And Sirius, whatever you do, you absolutely cannot tell anyone that I came back," Harry said seriously. "Why not? Don't you trust your friends?" Sirius asked. "It's not a question of trust, Sirius. It's just that if I start telling people, then they'll be all like, Harry, you're an adult and should really start acting like one. Besides, Snape is a hero, you really shouldn't be harassing him, and let me tell you, I had a lot of fun last year." I want to have fun this year and every year for the rest of my life. Once I tell people that I'm older than I appear, that fun goes out the window and I have to deal with responsibility. Harry wrinkled his nose at that. Besides, then people will be pestering me about their futures, and do you really think Remus and Tonks, Ginny and I, Ron and Hermione, or Bill and Fleur will get together if they know about it in the future? God no. Besides, Hannah is so shy now and Neville isn't anymore that if I told either of them about their future, I could destroy it. Nah, best to just let history continue naturally. Or, as naturally as I can, while still doing whatever I feel like, Harry amended. Sirius snorted. Now that's more like it. But while we're on the subject of doing whatever it is we feel like, how are we going to get me cleared? I'd rather it be sooner rather than later, personally, although I've had some fun this past year in Spain. Oh, so you did go to Mallorca? And I think that once I get to the Weasleys, I can nab Wormtail and Voldemort's first Horcrux in one fell swoop. Can you wait 2 months or so until we go to Diagon Alley to shop? Sirius looked him straight in the eye. I've waited 15 years to clear my name. I think I can wait a little longer. The next month and a half or so passed unbelievably slowly for Harry. He'd been getting mail, which was nice, but wanted to put off going to the Weasleys until after his birthday for 2 reasons. 1, a quiet meeting with Dobby. 2, it would be harder for him to meet with Sirius under Molly Weasley's watchful eye. It wasn't like he didn't like the woman, he did, it was just that she had a tendency to smother everyone with her love and he had long since outgrown the need for a mother. He had been so bored that he actually took the time to follow through with his vague plan from the year before to try and mend his relationship with his blood relatives. And, surprisingly, it seemed to work. He had actually volunteered to help his Aunt Petunia around the house and shared with her some of Neville's gardening tips, which caused them to spend quite a bit more time together and made her grudgingly earning his keep. She wouldn't admit to anything more, but he did notice a distinct improvement in her treatment of him. As for Dudley, that had been even easier. He just volunteered to play with him when his friends were busy and Dudley was far too thrilled to be able to play 2-person computer games whenever he wanted to risk upsetting Harry too much and forcing him to stick to 1-person games. He highly doubted either of his relatives liked him any better, but at least he had to deal with less open hostility. His Uncle Vernon, no doubt still sore from the scene Harry made at the train station last year, just growled whenever Harry was in the room, as if he didn't trust himself to do anything else. His friends were all also keeping him busy via letters. Harry was trying to convince Hermione that Lockhart was a fraud, Tonks to help break into Bellatrix's vault, Ron that being sorted into Slytherin wasn't an indication of evil, Ginny that he wasn't some sort of god, Neville that he should continue to show a backbone even though he was back with his relatives, Cedric to come play Quidditch with him once he was at the Weasleys, as they lived right by each other, Draco that knowing details about him that he had no business knowing, allegedly via his scar, was not the same thing as stalking, Percy to voluntarily leave his room more often than just mealtimes, and the twins to teach Ginny to ride a broom. Due to his persistence and utter boredom, these goals were coming along nicely, although Ron still wanted proof, Hermione still wanted an autograph, and Tonks still wanted more details. Harry was sure that Ginny would regress after coming face to face with him again, but she was actually managing to converse normally with him through their letters, now. It was really a good thing that Hedwig appreciated the workout, Harry reflected, because she was almost never at the Dursleys, which definitely helped his relations on that front. On the night of the Dursleys' dinner party, which also happened to be Harry's birthday, but it's not like they really cared, Harry was going to be quite busy. The first thing he needed to do was to make sure he was out of the house when Dobby decided to pop by. Sure enough, 8 on the dot, Dobby popped in front of Harry. Fortunately, Harry was sitting on a park bench with Sirius in dog form lying at his feet. Ah, Dobby, I was wondering if you'd make an appearance, Harry greeted him warmly. Please, sit down. How's Draco doing? You can only tell so much from letters. Dobby, who had been about to burst into tears at the fact that not only did Harry know his name, but he asked him to sit down like an equal when he realized what else the wizard had said. Did Draco? Yeah, you know, Draco Malfoy. The scion of the family you serve. How's he been? How is Harry Potter knowing of Dobby began? Magic scar, Harry said simply. Ah, yes, Dobby has been hearing Master Draco complain very loudly about that, Dobby admitted. But Dobby did not believe it. How else would I have known to ask Draco to order you to not steal my mail? Harry asked rhetorically. Dobby nodded, it was a good point. I don't think that you'd be required to punish yourself just for coming to see me, but either way, let me help you avoid any more self-inflicted injuries by informing you that I already know that Mr. Malfoy intends to give Ginny Weasley Tom Riddle's diary that will open the Chamber of Secrets and unleash a basilisk on Hogwarts. I can further promise you that I will always carry a mirror with me and that I won't do anything too stupid, but I will not promise not to go back to Hogwarts. If you use magic and disguise the signature as that of a wizard and so the ministry sends a bloody owl no matter what the occupants of the house may be doing or who may be over, then they will start treating me like the Malfoys treat you and it won't stop me anyway as my friends will just come to break me out, Harry explained calmly. Although I do appreciate the sentiment. Suddenly, a faint pop was heard as someone apparat into the woods surrounding the park. Well, I hate to cut this short, but it looks like my next appointment just arrived. She's early. Harry muttered. So unless you want more witnesses, I'd suggest you get going. It was nice meeting you, Harry said cheerfully as Dobby cast him a rueful look and apparated away. I hope you know what you're doing, Harry, Tonks said as she waked up to him. Because we could get in serious trouble for this. I know, but it's important. It's the only way to make sure that Voldemort actually dies. I mean, having him just floating around and possessing our defense against the dark arts teacher was bad enough. Imagine if he somehow managed to regain a body. Tonks shuddered. All right, but remember, you owe me. She grabbed Harry. She grabbed Harry's hand to apparate and noticed he was holding onto a dog. What's with the dog? He's my godfather, Harry explained. Your parents named a dog as your godfather? Tonks asked skeptically. Well, my dad did at any rate. But then, you'll have to remember that my father and his friends are Fred and George's heroes. Bonkers, the whole lot of you. Tonks muttered as she apparated them to Diagon Alley. As it was dark, there weren't a lot of people out and about, although Harry suspected that the leaky cauldron was packed. It usually was anytime after 5. Tonks, Sirius, and Harry made their way to Gringotts. Once inside, Tonks transformed into Bellatrix Lestrange. The goblins didn't really care if she was supposed to be in Azkaban nor that she was a convicted murderess, as the affairs of wizards never really interested them. When Tonks claimed she lost her key, the goblins did a simple blood test which she passed, being a close relative of hers, and the goblin on duty issued her a new key. As Bellatrix was in Azkaban and thus legally dead, as was the head of the Black family, Sirius, and Tonks was a relative of them both, she could have just laid claim to the vault herself, but Harry was afraid that would make her a target, and she hadn't even begun aura training yet. When they opened Bellatrix's vault door, Harry grabbed the Hufflepuff's cup and Tonks decided to liberate a bit of gold and some Black family heirlooms that had been part of Bellatrix's dowry, but she was sure her mother would appreciate more than her reportedly head case and imprisoned aunt. Although how she was going to explain how she got them, well, she could always blame it on Harry. He'd probably have a more convincing explanation anyway. Immediately following leaving Gringotts, Harry had Tonks drop him and Sirius off at the Weasleys. Apparently Neville had stayed with them in June and Hermione had stayed for part of July, so it was just him. To his delight, Percy was downstairs playing chess with Ron when Harry got there. He was about an hour earlier than he said he'd be, but that really couldn't be helped, and what else was he supposed to do until it was 10? Ginny turned bright red when she was him and looked like she was wanted to bolt from the room, but refrained. There were improvements already. Now, to keep them coming. 2 weeks after arriving, it was time to go to Diagon Alley. Harry was incredibly anxious and hoped that he hadn't or wouldn't do anything to change events enough that Lucius pawned the diary off on someone else. He had to admit, he'd gotten rather used to knowing what was going to happen and he'd hate to lose it before he absolutely had to. He'd had fun so far. He'd announced that Sirius was his new pet Padfoot and Sirius delighted in following the twins around and watching them prank people. He had made it a point to talk to Ginny whenever she happened to be in the room, and even though it was an uphill struggle, she had slowly graduated from monosyllabic answers to short sentences. Harry might have accidentally suggested to the twins that Percy might be spending so much time by himself this summer as opposed to what he'd apparently done previous summers because he might have a girlfriend, and the twins had jumped at the suggestion and kept insisting that Percy spend time with them, hoping he'd reveal something about his mystery girlfriend's identity. And if Harry didn't know better, he'd think Percy was enjoying driving the twins crazy with his cryptic answers on the subject. Apparently the twins had taken his suggestion to teach Ginny as a challenge, as they had no idea that she'd ever been on a broom before, and had been pleasantly surprised to find out that she could outfly people twice her age, no one who played Quidditch, of course, but then, she was self-taught. Cedric had been over 3 times already and they had tons of fun playing 3-on-3 Quidditch, and Percy, of course, took the twins' distraction to retreat to his room to study. Though he hadn't really known Cedric very well until they'd both been Hogwarts champions, Harry found that he rather enjoyed the older boy's company and resolved to try and keep him alive this time. Once at Diagon Alley, Harry convinced his friends to head to the apothecary first so he could go and pick up his special order Mandrake restorative draft. So maybe 3 dozen was a bit paranoid of him, but if there was one thing Hermione had taught him, it was that it never hurt to be prepared. Ron, Hermione, and Neville, who had arranged to go with the Weasleys when he'd stayed with them that summer, all looked at him strangely, but Harry's only comment was that his scar thought it was a good idea. He wondered briefly how long it would be before people thought he was crazy if he kept using that excuse to explain away his future knowledge. Eventually, the trio plus Neville made their way to Flourish and Blots. Harry tactfully suggested that the Weasleys only buy 2 book sets so that they could share them, and Mrs. Weasley, though a bit embarrassed, seemed to think that it was a good idea. Suddenly, Lockhart's photographer crashed into Ron. Out of the way, there, he snarled. This is for the Daily Prophet. Big deal, Ron muttered. Lockhart looked up and saw Ron. Unfortunately, Harry was standing right next to him. He leapt to his feet and shouted, "It can't be Harry Potter?" Where? Harry made a point of looking around, as if searching for himself. Aren't you Harry? Gilderoy asked, confused. Nope, Harry said brightly. But, your scar. Lockhart protested. Unfortunate cooking accident, Harry said shortly, repeating his story from the previous year. Then who are you? Lockhart demanded. Draco Malfoy. Oh, well, let me give you a free set of books to make up for this unfortunate mix-up, Lockhart said, handing him a set of books. He then turned his attention back to his adoring fans. Here, Harry said, dumping the books into Ginny's cauldron. Now you only need one set. But what about your books, Harry? Hermione asked. I don't intend to get them, Hermione. But, then how will you learn anything? She demanded. Harry snorted. Please, it's not like I'm going to learn anything this year anyway. He's a fraud, remember? Hermione nodded reluctantly. It had taken quite some time to disabuse her of the notion that the Master Obviator was a genius. Harry, why did you tell him you would? Mrs. Weasley began. It was you. Draco Malfoy's voice rang out from behind him. Yes, Draco? Harry asked politely. You started that rumor last year, didn't you? Draco demanded. The one about me being Snape's love child. Technically, Fred and George started that rumor, Harry pointed out. But yeah, I did have a hand in it. To be fair, though, it's not like we were friends at the time. But you just brought it to people's attention again. What's your excuse this time? Harry shut his mouth abruptly. I actually don't have one. Sorry. Draco rolled his eyes. And after I took the trouble of ordering Dobby to stay away from your mail, too. Oh, please, that couldn't have taken more than a couple minutes, Harry shot back. Although I do appreciate it. So, however did you manage to survive a summer with the Muggles? I mean, I'd imagine that would be even worse than a summer with the Weasleys, Draco said. Well, my aunt and cousin seemed to hate me less than usual this year, but my uncle looked like he wanted to strangle me every time he came near me, Harry replied. Fun, Draco said sarcastically. Remind me why you think Muggles are worth caring about again. Because my relatives treat me about the equivalent of how pure blood fanatics treat Muggles. Harry suggested. Minus the attempted murder. Ron, quick, your mother's distracted by Lockhart, let's make our escape, Mr. Weasley said as he and the twins struggled over to them. Well, Arthur Weasley, Lucius Malfoy drawled. Harry rolled his eyes. Good God, this was a chance meeting in a crowded bookstore, not an epic showdown in the Old West. Lucius, Arthur nodded, barely even pretending to be polite. Busy time at the Ministry, I hear. All those raids, I hope they're paying you overtime. He reached into Ginny's cauldron and pulled out the brand new copy of A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration. Harry had insisted on paying for their schoolbooks as they were putting him up for a month. Arthur and Molly had only agreed to this after he threatened to buy them all Nimbus 2001s instead. Who knew the way to beat an aversion to charity was to offer more charity? I guess they are. It's sad really how desperate you are for money that you would lower yourself to be a disgrace to the name of a wizard for a few extra galleons. We have a very different idea of what disgrace is the name of wizard, Malfoy, Arthur said. Clearly, Lucius said, his eyes straying towards the Grangers. The company dash. Personally, my definition of a disgrace to the name of wizard is anyone over the age of 15 who can't cast a simple Expelliarmus without dropping their wand, Harry piped up. Or someone who can't ride a broom without falling off, Draco added. Or someone who doesn't like Quidditch, was Ron's contribution. That definitely broke the tension and the Malfoys left without incident. Well, almost. Watching closely, Harry could see Lucius slipping the diary into Ginny's book. Too bad the fight had been averted, even if it was entirely Harry's doing, as he had been planning on betting Draco and the twins that Hagrid would win the fight between their fathers. Oh well. When Harry and the Weasleys arrived back at the Burrow, after saying goodbye to the Grangers, who walked out into Muggle London, and Neville, who flew home, everyone put their things in their room and Ron immediately challenged Harry to a game of chess. As Harry had accepted whenever Ron asked previously, following his theory that the more Ron beat Harry in chess the less of an inferiority complex he would have regarding him, he couldn't really think of an adequate reason to decline and go upstairs instead, and so was forced to play a match. His heart really wasn't in it, though, and he played even worse than usual. The minute he lost, he practically flew up the stairs and into Ginny's room. He tore open her Transfiguration book. Nothing. He looked through the rest of her school supplies. Nothing. He spent the rest of the afternoon searching through the whole house. Still nothing. By nightfall, he was forced to come to one terrifying conclusion. The diary was gone. And so was Scabbers. Chapter 11. Gone? Sirius repeated hollowly later that night when Harry snuck out to meet him. Gone? What do you mean he's gone? Harry sighed. I suppose it was too much to hope for that you had completely ignored my explicit instructions and taken them early. Why would I have? You said you were going to take care of it, Sirius pointed out. I still can't believe he's gone. I mean, I was so close, and now he's gone. Not he, Harry corrected. The diary Horcrux is gone, too. Sirius groaned. You know, I may have been rotting away in Azkaban at this point the last time you were a second year, but given that Wormtail was with the Weasleys in Egypt, I can still be fairly certain that this didn't happen. You're right, Harry agreed. The only question is, why did it happen? Why would Pettigrew have taken off with the diary? Sirius shot Harry a look. Oh, I don't know. Maybe it was when you announced that I was your pet Padfoot. Maybe even though Wormtail managed to not spook when I escaped Azkaban because I didn't really show any inclination to make your life harder by showing a vested interest in getting into Hogwarts, he heard my name and decided that it was either the most incredible coincidence, or I was here and out to get him. As to why he took the diary, I don't know. Maybe he recognized it from when Voldemort gave it to Lucius. Harry glared at Sirius, completely ignoring the last part of his statement. Well, maybe that wasn't the best idea to call you that, but I don't recall you coming up with any better suggestions. Sure I did, Sirius argued. What, Snuffles? Sorry Sirius, no pet of mine will ever go by such a cutesy name. Seriously, if you want me to come up with a more badass way to have survived Voldemort than the power of love, then you've got to come up with a more badass alias than Snuffles. Seriously, that sounds like something Ginny would have picked out. Sirius started laughing. Really? She can't have been that bad. Wanna bet? We got a rabbit last year and guess what Ginny named it? Flopsy. What did you want to call it? Sirius managed to ask between his laughter. Mega Ultra Flame Deathsman. Hey, that's a perfectly respectable name for a rabbit. Harry insisted, crossing his arms as Sirius literally fell to the ground howling. You know, if you're not going to take this seriously, I'm going back to bed. After a few moments, Sirius composed himself. But Harry, I'm always Siri dash. One serious pun and I'm going back to bed, Harry warned. Fine. Sirius pouted. So what are we going to do? We know that Pettigrew is off somewhere with the diary, but we don't know if he knows it's a Horcrux or not. Probably not. After all, if the likes of Lucius Malfoy and Bellatrix Lestrange, who, by all accounts, were two of Voldemort's favorites, never knew, I can't imagine why a spy would be told. No one ever trusts a spy. After all, if they can be a double agent, they can be a triple agent just as easily. Speaking of Sirius began. Harry rolled his eyes. Yes, Sirius, I'm positive Snape really is on our side. You really should let this go. It's not healthy to carry a grudge for 20 years or so. Try telling that to him. Sirius muttered. Well, to be fair, you did try to kill him when he was 16 and that was probably very traumatic, Harry said diplomatically. I mean, I know I was traumatized when Remus transformed that night at the Shrieking Shack, and he didn't even get a chance to try and kill me. Thanks for that, by the way. Don't mention it. After all, what are godfathers for? And I do tell him this. On a regular basis. But to my credit, I think I've managed to annoy him so much that he's somewhat stopped seeing me as my father and now sees me as my own extremely irritating person, Harry said proudly. With a little effort, he'd managed in 1 year what he previously hadn't been able to accomplish in 6. Way to go, Sirius said appreciatively. Getting back on topic, even though Wormtail won't know what the diary is, he'll probably end up writing in it at some point. When he does, he'll realize that this is the closest he's going to get to Voldemort's orders. He'll keep writing and probably get possessed. When he does. Harry sighed heavily. When he does, the Chamber of Secrets will probably be opened again. Harry knew he had forgotten something. It was bugging him all morning, he just couldn't quite remember what it was. This was a rare instance in which Neville's remembrall might have been useful, except that Harry already knew that he'd forgotten something, and as the magical mood ring wouldn't tell him what, exactly, he'd forgotten, Harry knew he'd probably have just gotten frustrated and thrown it. Of course, it wasn't realistic to expect Harry to remember everything. On the other hand, now the platform had sealed itself and he and Ron were trapped outside while everyone else was trapped inside and the train had just left. Last time, of course, they'd flown the Weasleys' car to school. Of course, that was incredibly dangerous and highly irresponsible and they should really wait for Ron's parents and, oh, who was he kidding? I'll drive. Climbing into the passenger seat, Ron looked at Harry skeptically. Do you even know how to drive? Of course, Harry said matter-of-factly. Everyone who's lived in the Muggle world knows how to drive. So it's like the Muggle version of flying? Ron asked as Harry took off. Kind of. Harry lied. He did, in fact, know how to drive, having been bullied into getting a license by Hermione shortly after he defeated Voldemort. They have a sport based on it at any rate. Like Quidditch. A little. It's more about racing the cars and hoping they don't crash into each other or into the wall or spontaneously combust in the process, Harry explained. Muggles are strange, Ron commented. That they are, Ron. That they are, Harry said absently as he sped up, looking for the train. It was pretty simple, just following the tracks. After about 10 minutes, they found had caught up to the express. Harry started to slowly descend, aiming to land on the top of the train. Are you crazy? You can't land here. Ron shouted. Why not? Harry asked innocently. You'll get us both killed. Oh, I will not. It'll be fine. See? To prove his point, Harry slowly brought them down to the last compartment. The landing was a little bumpy, but then, the train was moving at roughly 60 miles an hour. Ron looked green and stumbled out of the car and to the edge of the train. He then promptly vomited. Harry wrinkled his nose. Nice. How about you go first, he suggested, helping Ron down into the compartment below them. Once his friend was out of sight, Harry took out his wand, tapped the car, and whispered, Portus. Harry watched the car vanish with some satisfaction. It had taken him a while to get the hang of that spell. He then followed Ron into the compartment below them. A stray spell immediately grazed his ear. What the hell? Harry asked, looking around. He groaned. Of course, they had picked the second-year Slytherins' compartment. Can you guys just chill for a second? Chill? Draco repeated. What does that mean? Oh, never mind, Harry said, deciding it was best not to mention that was Muggle slang. Why are you guys attacking each other? I was only up there for 2 minutes. We were minding our own business when suddenly a Gryffindor fell from the sky. We thought we were under attack, a blonde Slytherin girl Harry vaguely recognized as Daphne Greengrass told him innocently. It was 9-on-1, how can that possibly be considered self-defense? Harry asked curiously. We thought it was a Weasley invasion and the rest of his siblings would follow him, a redhead Harry was fairly certain was Tracy Davis explained. He really should pay more attention to the students in his year. Harry rolled his eyes. I'm sure. Anyway, Ron, I got rid of the car so with any luck, your parents will just think that they're going crazy and we didn't take the car. How did you get rid of the car? Ron asked, confused. I don't think we learned any spells to do that last year. Magic. Yeah, I kinda got that part. But how exactly did you dash? Am I to understand that you flew a car from King's Cross Station to here? Draco interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Yep, Harry beamed. Is there any point in asking why? Remember when I asked you to order Dobby not to steal my mail? Harry asked. Draco nodded. Well, I forgot to ask you to have him not try to save my life, Harry explained. So you flew a car to the Hogwarts Express because my house elf wants to save your life? Draco repeated incredulously. Basically. You're going to need to explain that, Draco said bluntly. Harry sighed theatrically. He's apparently gotten it into his head that Hogwarts is a walking death trap and therefore I'm better off with my Muggle relatives and in particular my Muggle uncle who could snap at any time and try and strangle me. Therefore, he sealed the portal to the platform and Ron and I got bored so we decided not to wait for everyone to fix the mess and just fly here. Draco just stared at him. That has got to be the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And that is a fine example of the pot calling the kettle black. Seriously, though, you sound like Hermione. Draco just made a face at him. Do you think he'll try to save your life again? Almost certainly. Right, this is bloody ridiculous. Dobby. Draco called. Yes, Master? Dobby asked hesitantly when he appeared. I order you to stop trying to save Harry's life. It's very annoying. Just let him stay at Hogwarts. Got that? Why yes, Master Draco, Dobby said, his ears drooping. Great, now go. With a pop, Dobby was gone. Thanks, Harry said, relieved. I really owe you one. Draco waved it aside. Don't mention it. Just get the weasel out of my compartment before we're forced to hex him again. Okay. By Draco, by rest of the second-year Slytherins I don't like as much as Draco, Harry waved cheerfully as he dragged Ron to the next compartment. The next compartment they tried had Cedric and Cho Chang in it, flirting shamelessly. Then they came across the Weasley twins, Lee Jordan, Angelina Johnson, Alicia Spinnet, and Katie Bell examining the twins' pranking supplies. They encountered Oliver Wood and Percy playing wizarding chess. Oliver had made some comment about how it was nice that they won the cup last year because that was the first time they had won since Charlie Weasley left. Percy had pointed out that Charlie had only graduated 2 years ago and Oliver threw a book at his head. In fact, it seemed like they had passed most of the Hogwarts population before they finally came across Hermione and Neville, who were sitting in one of the first compartments with Ginny and Luna Lovegood. There you are. Harry said exasperated. We've been looking everywhere for you. I think that's my line, Hermione said, amused. Neville and I looked up and down the train for you twice before we finally just grabbed this compartment. You were supposed to follow Mum and I through the portal but we didn't see you, Ginny pointed out. That's because the platform sealed itself and we flew Dad's car to the Hogwarts Express, Ron said bluntly. You did what? I take it you don't approve? Harry asked mildly. Of course I don't approve. You could have been spotted. Or killed. Or expelled. Hermione finished, looking horrified. We've already been over this, Hermione, Harry said gently. It'll take a lot more than that to expel someone. Especially me. Hell, my godfather didn't get expelled for trying to feed Professor Snape to a werewolf. Isn't your godfather Sirius Black? Ron asked. Harry had forgotten that he had mentioned that on Christmas to Ron, the twins, Percy, and Tonks. He supposed he was fortunate that Tonks had forgotten that when he mentioned that Sirius, in dog form, was his godfather. Well, either that or she thought he was joking. Otherwise he might have had problems. Oh, well, yes, he finally managed to say. Hermione looked even more horrified. Dear God, he tried to feed Professor Snape to a werewolf and was still allowed to attend Hogwarts. What was Dumbledore thinking? Harry shrugged. Everyone short of Voldemort deserves 53 chances. Why 53? Neville asked. It's a nice, even number. No, it's not, Neville said, confused. That's not the point. The point is, we totally flew Ron's dad's car halfway to school and then I used my incredible awesomeness to send it back. As long as you didn't tell anyone, I guess we can just pretend that it never happened then, Hermione said reluctantly. She paused. Wait. You didn't tell anyone, did you? Ron and Harry looked at each other for a minute, then Ron quickly asked his sister about what she thought of the Hogwarts experience thus far and Harry introduced himself to Luna. Neville was thus left to try and calm Hermione down. After all, they'd totally told everyone they happened to come across. The welcoming feast was very nice, no less because he hadn't been expecting to get to attend it when he and Ron had initially taken the car. Harry cheered loudly when Ginny made it to Gryffindor and he also convinced Fred, George, Hermione, Neville, and Ron to cheer with him when Luna made it to Ravenclaw. That attracted some strange looks as no one ever cheered for anyone not in their house, but when had that ever stopped Harry? Best of all, he was receiving some suspicious looks from the staff. No doubt they had heard the rumors of his and Ron having commandeered Ron's parents' flying car, but as none of the Slytherins who saw them enter the train felt particularly inclined to tattle, there was really nothing they could do. Harry was a bit tired from the all-night Harry and Ron flew a car halfway to Hogwarts and got away with it party in the common room, but he was overall quite cheerful the next morning. Everyone had been there, even Percy, who Harry had to spend 20 minutes convincing that their little excursion was just an excuse to hold a party, and if they had just ridden the train like everyone else, they would have been celebrating the welcoming feast. Harry looked up from his breakfast in time to see the Weasley family owl, Errol, practically collapse in front of Ron. And what's more, it had a howler in its beak. Ron turned pale and everyone in the Great Hall, who had looked up at the sight of Errol practically dying, looked torn between leaning closer to hear what Ron's parents were going to say about the incident or running from the room. Seriously, howlers were annoying. Yes, it was plenty embarrassing for the person receiving them, but the parents should really keep their admonishments more private. Not to mention that everyone in the Great Hall didn't particularly care to hear a lecture every time any student screwed up. Fortunately, Harry solved their dilemma for them. He casually opened the letter and it started screeching Ronald Bilious Weasley. Of course, that was as far as it got as Harry quickly tapped the howler and whispered, Muffliato. The howler was still going, but no one could hear it anymore. Well, no one but him. Still, small price to pay for the way everyone was looking at him in awe at how he had defeated a howler. Oh, and he saved Ron the embarrassment of getting chewed out by his mother in front of everybody. That was nice, too. And did he hear some murmurs already of the boy who silenced? Wizards sure did love their hyphens. Chapter 12. As Professor McGonagall handed out the schedules, she paused to inform Harry and Ron that Ron's parents had flewed over their trunks. Surprisingly, Harry had completely forgotten that he'd left the trunks in the car when he'd sent it back, and so he hadn't even been worried. He probably would have noticed that they didn't have any belongings at the school except that the all-night party had ended just half an hour ago, so there really hadn't been time. That would explain how Mrs. Weasley knew that they'd taken the car, though. Oh well, the lack of supplies could have been really bad, but catastrophe averted. Hermione had wanted to head out to the greenhouses early, but Ron and Harry insisted on going back for their supplies. According to her, they shouldn't have been so irresponsible as to forget them, but, well, they were. Once they finally reached the greenhouses, they saw the rest of the class already standing outside. And pointing and laughing at the panicked expression on Ron, Neville, and Hermione's faces as the four raced across the grounds. Harry, on the other hand, would have preferred being late, as that almost certainly would have ended up meaning a loss of house points. Speaking of, maybe he should admit to hijacking the car after all, that should be good for at least 100 points lost. Still, Harry wasn't quite sure if that would be worth the one more toe out of line threat or giving up the notoriety of getting away with it. Professor Sprout didn't even seem to notice their tardiness, however, as she was too busy trying to see just how much her body language could scream "Go away and shut up, I don't care" to Gilderoy Lockhart before he'd take a hint. Unfortunately for her, Lockhart was immune to such mundane things as whether or not his listener was seconds away from stabbing him with a spade. Greenhouse 3 today, chaps. Professor Sprout managed to get out when Lockhart paused to take a breath. When Lockhart's eyes swept over the class appraisingly, she made good her escape. Harry, still looking to lose points, took his time and paid for that dearly. No sooner had he begun to lag behind than Lockhart spotted him. Harry! Lockhart shouted, sounding far more enthusiastic than he had any right being. I've been wanting a word. You don't mind if he's a couple minutes late, do you? Oh dear, I do believe she's left already. Well, I'm sure she won't mind at any rate. He eyed Harry critically. Harry. When I heard, well, of course, it was all my fault. Could have kicked myself. Don't know when I've been more shocked. Flying a car to Hogwarts. Actually, Professor, the rumor is that I flew a car to the Express. And I'm not actually admitting to anything, mind you, so you don't need to worry that people will think you've been a bad influence on me, Harry reassured him, wondering vaguely why Lockhart felt the need to keep saying his name. It was kind of creepy. And rather irritating, he didn't like his name that much. Lockhart chuckled. Of course. It'll be our little secret. Still, of course, I knew at once why you'd done it. Stood out a mile. Harry. Harry twitched. Seriously, if Lockhart didn't quit this annoying habit of repeating his name over and over and sounding rather perverted, Harry couldn't possibly be held responsible for his actions during the Cornish pixie lesson, he supposed was the word, but they really hadn't learned anything except Hermione was smarter than their defense against the dark arts professor and really, hadn't they all already thought that? Well, the male students, at least. And the non-enamored females. Because I under the mistaken impression that you were Draco Malfoy, you didn't get to make the front page with me and so you had no choice but to fly a car to the Express in order to finally get that publicity I just know you've been craving, Lockhart beamed, clearly proud. Harry just stared at Lockhart. Did he even read the paper? But, I didn't make the front page. It wasn't even mentioned in the paper at all because no one has any proof that there's more truth in it than the persistent rumors that my Draco Malfoy is the love child of Narcissa Malfoy and Professor Snape. Lockhart chuckled. Ah, yes. I did hear about that. I didn't want to say anything, of course, but I've always suspected, in fact, I made sure to mention that fact in my autobiography. Now everyone can know the truth of such a touching love story. Why, it's a modern-day Romeo and Juliet, isn't it? Harry had to fight to the urge to burst out laughing. Oh, Draco was going to kill him. I feel obligated to warn you not to let the fame go to your head. You're still young, you should take it easy, alright? You'll have plenty of time to figure out what you want to be famous for, how to go about accomplishing that, and how to manage your fame when you're older. Getting yourself expelled for pulling stunts like these, well, it will certainly earn you a little notoriety in the short term, but it won't last and it will put a damper on any and all future plans, Lockhart told him seriously. Harry was shocked. He had no idea that Lockhart had put this much thought into cultivating his fame, but he supposed it made sense. After all, he'd as good as admitted that the only aspect of magic he was particularly proficient in was memory charms, so to have built up the reputation he had only on the strength of one spell, well, that was damn impressive, Harry was forced to acknowledge. And you need to be even more careful because a few people have heard of you, haven't they? All that business with he who must not be named. Lockhart laughed. I know, it's not quite as good as winning Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award 5 times in a row, as I have, but it's a start, Harry, it's a start. Dear God, Harry had been so confused and affronted that Lockhart thought he was just attention-seeking that he hadn't even realized, but Lockhart was joking. He didn't actually think that a smiling competition was more fame-worthy than mysteriously vanishing Voldemort. Maybe he wasn't such an idiot after all. Granted, he was still practically a squib, too self-centered to pay attention to what anyone else thought of him, and unscrupulous as hell, but definitely not an idiot. Professor, Harry began as Lockhart was about to walk away. Your style of fame seems to be the popularity contest kind. I mean, yes, your books detail the adventures of you dealing with Yeti, werewolves, vampires, and several other assortments of magical creatures, but that all seems to be besides the point, isn't it? Your readers don't buy the books because they really care about all of that. They just like you and your heroic deeds are just an excuse for them to get to hear more about you and keep you in the public eye. You make sure that you're always in the back of people's minds by winning contests like the Witch Weekly one you told me about. It's quite a clever strategy, and if you don't do something really stupid, it should be able to evolve with the times and keep you in the public eye for as long as you choose to be so. Lockhart stared at Harry incredulously for a moment before he smirked. Impressive. I take it that's not your style. Harry shook his head. No, I don't need to worry about people forgetting me because that's just never going to happen, at least not in my lifetime. I disappeared from the magical world for 10 years immediately following my ascension to hero status, and yet parents have been telling their children bedtime stories about me all this time, despite the fact that no one even knew anything about what happened that night at Godric's Hollow. I don't need to remind people that I exist, and since everyone is so enamored with me already, I can just basically do whatever I feel like because unless I do something really stupid, the bad PR resulting from expelling me or anything of the sorts would just make it not worth it. Using this immunity, I can bolster my fame and popularity among my peers by such daring escapades as last year's little treasure hunt and allegedly flying a car to the Hogwarts Express. That's a little callous, don't you think? Lockhart asked, not bothered in the slightest. Harry shrugged. Perhaps. Don't get me wrong, I would do anything for my friends and I wouldn't just leave them to suffer the consequences that I can evade using my fame, but I have to be careful. If I don't carefully navigate things, then what's to stop some gossip-mongering journalist or pissed-off bureaucrat from doing irreparable harm to my reputation and making sure I'm not in a position to be able to help the people I need to? It's called being proactive. Well, you clearly know what you're doing, so I wish you well. May both of our fames continue to grow in the years to come, Lockhart told him sincerely and continued on his way. Harry shook his head to clear it. Having a serious discussion with Lockhart was not something that he had ever thought he'd do in the timeline. Ah, well. He was far certain that he was far more than just fashionably late, so maybe he would get some points taken off after all. When Harry entered the greenhouse, Professor Sprout was just about to input a mandrake. When she saw Harry slip in, she stopped and took her earmuffs off. And where were you? I was chatting with Professor Lockhart about how famous we both are, Harry deadpanned. Professor Sprout narrowed her eyes. I see. 10 points from Gryffindor for your tardiness, Mr. Potter. You can discuss your fame on your own time. Yes. Harry cheered as he slid into a seat next to Neville. I wouldn't get too excited, Neville told him. Hermione earned 50 while we were waiting for you. Harry threw his head back and wailed, "No! Curses, foiled again. How could you, Hermione? I thought we were supposed to be friends." Hermione just rolled her eyes. You'll get over it. Face it, mate, Ron told him frankly. Dumbledore likes you way too much to let you lose the house cup. Or hates me too much. Harry muttered. Ron ignored him. Even if you and Snape do manage to end the year at 100 points or so dash. And the lowest house point total ever was 116, and that was Gryffindor 1978, Hermione interrupted. Harry couldn't help a quick smile from flitting across his face. That was the Marauders' 7th year, and clearly they'd gone out with a bang. Right, Ron nodded. Even if you managed that, Dumbledore would still end up giving Gryffindor 400 points for whatever really stupid thing you and anyone stupid enough to go along with you without any sort of explanation beyond your scar said it was a good idea felt the need to do that will land you in the hospital wing for the entire last week of school. Harry hung his head, knowing they were right. Right, so if Mr. Potter has been brought up to speed, everyone put your earmuffs back on, Professor Sprout ordered. Harry just shook his head, unable to believe that she honestly thought they were actually on topic. Fortunately, he'd done extensive research on mandrakes over the summer in preparation for this year's petrifactions. He didn't think he actually had anything to worry about until Halloween, though. After all, if an 11-year-old could resist Voldemort for 2 or 3 months, depending on when she'd started using the diary, Pettigrew certainly could. Hi, Harry, Colin Creevey chirped excitedly. He looked nervous, but determined. I'm Colin Creevey. I'm in Gryffindor, too. I know, Harry said quietly, remembering how pale Colin had looked in death, and how small. He had no business sneaking back into the castle to fight Voldemort, he was only 16. I saw you get sorted. You did? Now Colin was really red. Do you think, would it be alright if, can I have a picture, he asked, raising his camera hopefully. Alright, Harry agreed slowly. If it had been anyone else or if Colin hadn't given his life long before his time, Harry would have refused and used the opportunity to banter with Draco and Lockhart, but it was strange. He'd thought it was endearing when Ginny had come back to fight despite being too young, but that's because he'd never thought she'd die. He'd never thought Colin would die, either. Hermione, would you? He asked, taking the camera from Colin and handing it to Hermione, figuring she was most likely to know how to operate. Standing next to Colin, Harry smiled as the flash went off. I'm just saying it's weird, Ron said again as they headed towards defense. And I'm just saying leave it, Harry retorted irritably. But you hate it when people get all crazy and starstruck around you, so why would you? Ron tried again. Harry whirled around. Because he reminds me of a friend of mine who died, okay. Now just drop it. Ron paled, as he always did at the thought of death. Even at 12, he was still so sheltered. Harry took a deep breath and then headed to his seat. I see you've all bought a complete set of my books, well done, Lockhart was saying. I thought we'd start today with a little quiz. As Lockhart continued to drone, Hermione turned to Harry and glared. I still can't believe that you didn't buy the books. How can you possibly pass this class if you don't get the textbooks? Harry sighed dramatically. First of all, they're not textbooks, they're storybooks. Secondly, I'm a celebrity. I come with a built-in BS ability. Third, Lockhart would never risk the wrath of his adoring public by flunking The Boy Who Lived and or silenced, and finally, it's all about the final exams anyway. Hermione still didn't look happy, but Lockhart just placed a quiz down in front of her so she was forced to let it go. Let's see. Harry muttered, staring at his own quiz. 1. What is Gilderoy Lockhart's favourite colour? Famous, formerly, hot magenta. 2. What is Gilderoy Lockhart's secret ambition? To be able to take credit for every dangerous magical creature that's defeated anywhere in Europe. 3. What, in your opinion, is Gilderoy Lockhart's greatest achievement to date? The building and management of his adoring fan base. And so on it went until finally Harry got to the last question. 54. When it is Gilderoy Lockhart's birthday, what would his ideal gift be? The recent defeat of a dangerous magical creature in a mysterious manner with no witnesses. He was pretty sure that his answers differed from what was in Lockhart's books, not that he had ever read them, of course, but still they were bound to contain fewer references to his obviating habit, but he still felt that they were appropriate and somewhat accurate. Glancing through the tests, Harry could tell when Lockhart got to his because he just stopped and stared at it for a few minutes before shaking his head and moving past it without a word. When Lockhart was done giving the class the answers, and Harry and Ron were consequently done playing wizarding chess, Neville was done watching them, and Hermione was done lecturing them about the importance of paying attention while simultaneously taking notes like the girl genius she was, he moved on to the next part of the lesson, Cornish pixies. Harry tuned out Lockhart's attempt to convince the class that Cornish pixies were, in fact, highly dangerous creatures because he didn't think he could stop himself from saying something that would probably land him a detention. Normally, he wouldn't care, but there was no way in hell he was going to get stuck answering Lockhart's fan mail again. Right then, Lockhart declared grandly, throwing open the door to the pixie cage. Let's see what you make of them. Harry watched impassively as the released pixies rushed around the room destroying everything. Pesky pixie pestinomi. Lockhart bellowed after waiting until the class was suitably impressed. In did absolutely nothing. Perhaps it was a joke spell. Like the one the twins had given Ron to change Scabbers' colour. Have you tried immobilize? Harry suggested, pointing at one of the pixies, and while the class turned to watch the pixie fall, he discreetly pointed his wand at the other pixies and cast several silent freezing charms. How did you do that? Seamus asked. Harry rolled his eyes. With my incredible awesomeness, we've been over this, God. Well done, Harry. Lockhart beamed as he brushed himself off and got out from behind his desk. 50 points to Gryffindor. Harry sat frozen in horror. No matter what I do, there's no escaping it, just kill me now. Chapter 30.